Blackhawks fans, welcome to another edition of the Four Feathers podcast. It has been a hot minute, but it feels so good to be back on these airwaves talking Chicago Blackhawks hockey. I am Ron Luce. He is Tony Marchese. Tony, first off, happy hump day. Second off, my friend, how are you doing? It's been a couple weeks.
It has been a couple weeks, Ronald. It's good to be back on the microphone. Talk a little Blackhawks hockey. It's baseball season. It's been a little bit of a rough start for my White Sox, and I think your Cubs have gotten off to a little bit better of a start. But I know we've been in baseball mode. You guys were out there at Wrigley Field. It's the changing of the seasons, but we definitely have a lot of Blackhawks hockey to talk about and a lot of good topics in store tonight, Ron. I'm doing well. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, sir. I'm doing well. As you mentioned, baseball season has reached upon us. Busy stuff. The White Sox home opener is this coming Friday now due to the potential rain out on Thursday. Of course, Wrigley's home opener was a week ago, and I was present with a number of members of our Cubs on Tap crew. It was a great time. Also, little birthday celebrations for all Ron Luce here. So it was a good time. Part of the reason why there was no Four Feathers show. So if you're angry at anybody, you can be angry at me. But for those that are tuning along with us, because Tony, I'm excited. I'm ready to talk Blackhawks hockey. But if you want to be like our good friend, Mr. Skokes here, dudes, what's up, dudes? How you doing? Jump in the comment section. Let us know what's going on. See how you're feeling. Hello, Daniel Barry. How are you, sir? Happy Wednesday. What's up, everybody? Tony, let's get right into it, shall we? The Blackhawks are 2-4-2 since our last Four Feathers episode. They were able to get revenge against the Minnesota Wild up in Minnesota right after we recorded, which was great. I think vibes were very high. And then things kind of started to sputter a little bit. A tough overtime loss. They were 1-1 through 3. I think everything felt okay at that point. And then the wheels really fell off once they got on the road. And, losses in Philly, a win against the New York Islanders. Got it off to a good start. But again, the loss in Philly. The loss against the New York Rangers, the loss on Sunday, against the Devils, which has been added to our Games They'll Want backtracker, and then their lone home game before jumping onto a West Coast road trip for 3 games coming up here that we'll talk about a little bit later. And of course, that results in an overtime loss as well to the Winnipeg Jets. So, Tone, just quick synopsis here, man, because again, we're not going to break down game by game, but I want to get your vibe check. I want to know where Tony Marchese is in the headspace of Blackhawks hockey, because we don't have a ton of games left. 7 Blackhawks hockey games between now and the end of April. First off, happy April, everybody. And then the season's over. We know they're not going to make the playoffs unless something unruly happens in these last 7 games. Where do you stand, my friend, as we enter the true home stretch here of the season?
I would say I'm a little disappointed, Ron, in how this season has shaken out for a couple of reasons. And one is this unsightly Games They'll Want backtracker, Ron. You just mentioned throwing a couple of more on the on that tracking sheet that we have here. This feels like a team that took a lot of steps forward in many different aspects, right? We'll go high level here. I thought that the coaching was better this year. I thought that the defense was even a little bit better this year. Sure. You had career highs from guys like Tyler Bertuzzi, Connor Bedard, starting to reach career plateaus or peaks at this point. The penalty kill. I think, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is a top of the league penalty kill. They had a lot of things going for them throughout the year. But they just didn't know how to win hockey games and put teams away. And I think that that's the overarching, where's Tony Marchese at on this team? I am at the point where I'm frustrated watching this team choke away leads so effortlessly. I was running the Four Feathers Twitter account the other night. You were on your X account. And I think we both posted the same South Park clip of, and it's gone.
The Blackhawks had the lead, and it's gone.
That's what it feels like when you're watching these games. We could laugh about it right now because they're not on, but right. I get very angry when I'm watching
Definitely.
these things, very angry. And so I feel like I've had a lot more of these angry moments, at least through the second half of the season,
Okay.
than I did in the first half. We could talk about how Bedard going down and Frank Nazar going down for a little stretch, and Nazar had a bit of a slump associated with that. I would call Connor Bedard sort of a mini slump, but he still produced
Sure.
points in that span. But that drought from Frank Nazar was concerning at points in time. You're looking to finish strong, and I think that's what both you and I were really looking for this team to do, and sort of just wreak a little havoc down the stretch here in April, and
Yeah.
some tough hockey. They've been in games or they've been blown out, but they haven't really found a way to consistently string some wins together.
Mhm.
And maybe I didn't explicitly say that on the show, but now thinking back, what I really wanted was for them to go on a 4 or 5 game win streak down the stretch. And there's still time for them to do so.
Sure.
But they're a little bit banged up now injury wise. We'll go through the injuries in a minute, but you're missing some pieces to this lineup, and some guys are going to be out for the remainder of the year. You want to finish healthy. I wouldn't exactly say that they're finishing healthy. When you just look at the big picture, it's not the big names, but there's some names out there that you wish were finishing the season. Artem Levshinov, one of them. So I think it's sort of a little bit of a disappointing end to the season. There's still time to close it on a high note, but I compare it to kind of last year, Ron, and where the vibes were, right? Sam Renzel coming into the fold was just like knocking the socks off of everyone. Then you get sort of Anton Frondell's in that position right now this year. But the difference was it felt like we were winning a couple more games down the stretch after the college guys got here last year. And I think people were looking forward, like, okay, they're going to take that next step this coming season, which is this one. I don't think that they've really like shown you too much at this point. Frondell looks great. Frondell looks awesome, but the product as a whole still hasn't figured out how to be that team that can win a hockey game when they have a 1-2, sometimes 3-goal lead. You're never really comfortable with it. And until we start to see this team play comfortable with a lead, I think those question marks are going to be there. And we're going to dissect that as as things go on, and probably well into next year, and what the difference is. But I'd really like to see them close out a 3-goal lead, a 2-goal lead before the end of this season. At least put together a 2-3 game win streak for me, please. I don't really think you're in a position where it's really going to hurt or help your draft position all too much. Just go out there and play good hockey. Give me something to be thinking about all summer, Ron, because as you're right, you got 7 games left, man. It's not a lot of hockey left to play here. How about you? How are you feeling?
Tony, I'm in the same boat as you, and I'm not in the same boat as you, and I'll explain. First off, a good hello and a happy hello to Ryan McGregor joining us in the comment section. Big shout out to Ryan, another great content creator here in the Blackhawks space. If you haven't already, be sure that you're following along with Ryan because he does great stuff.
Agreed.
But Tony, I'll tell you, I think I agree with you in the sense that at the end of last season, once Oliver Moore joined the team, once Sam Renzel joined the team, this team was exciting and they were winning some more games. And I think the reason for that was because you still had a lot of veterans in place. You still had Nick Foligno. You still had Jason Dickinson. You still had Connor Murphy. You still had that leadership group, right? This year, Kyle Davidson said it after the trade deadline, and we've discussed that here already on the airwaves. I won't get too far into it, but he said this is the kids' locker room now. There's not a lot of veterans left. Like, yes, Teuvo Teravainen's still here. Yes, Tyler Bertuzzi's still here. Yes, players like Sam Lafferty are still here, and Andrei Burakovsky and Ilya Mikheyev. But the guys that you're looking to for the future are the likes of Connor Bedard, or the likes of Frank Nazar, or the likes of some of these other notable names, even Alex Vlasic, who has been very vocal, I think, overall when it comes to the media and speaking with the media and dissecting the team's play. Tony, I'd be lying to you if I said I'm more in the dumps this year than I was last year. And there's a couple of reasons for that. shameless plug, wrote a great article over at ontapsportsnet.com that highlights a little bit of this. It felt like this season kind of was the perfect storm for the Blackhawks because they still tangibly improved. Like speaking in the standings, I think having a top penalty kill in the league is a significant sign of said improvement, especially now down the stretch for them to be able to maintain it with a lot of young guys taking key positions on said penalty kill. I think there's still a lot of good things that they did well this year, and they tangibly improved. Like there's no doubt about it. I think you agree. I think every Blackhawks fan would agree. There is general improvement. But even with that general improvement, this team is still is such a unique situation this year because they're still the second worst record in the league, Tone. They have the second best odds at winning the number one friggin' pick. Like, it's kind of the perfect storm. They got better, but the rest of the league is such a shitstorm in the standings that they're positioned to get another huge piece in this coming draft in the top five, we'll just call it, for sake of, the chances that the ping pong balls aren't kind to the Blackhawks, while still showing that improvement. And I agree with you. I still have that frustration too of I want to see this team close out a couple more games down the stretch. Like I want to see maybe Spencer Knight steal a game. And I think he's played well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here calling him out, but I would love to see a Spencer Knight, stolen victory. Maybe one of these two games coming up here on the road. I'd love to see a game dominated by your three big youngins down the middle right now. I think those type of games would be huge. I felt really good about Tuesday's game. I'll be brutally honest. I'm pissed that this team sucks at 3-on-3 right now because I think they played a great hockey game, all things considered. You just want them to capitalize a little bit more. And I agree with you there, Tone. And you mentioned this guy here, Anton Frondell. And Lebowski asks, are you okay with Frondell already playing wing and center in his first 5 games in the NHL? Absolutely. He's the reason, Tone, ultimately, that my hopes are high. I think Oliver Moore is going to be a very good NHL player. And there was that hype last year when he came up to the team. I think Sam Renzel is going to be a very serviceable NHL defenseman. And I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I like a lot of the things that Sam Renzel does with and without the puck. But Anton Frondell might be a superstar, Tom. And we've seen it in just this small glimpse of 5 games. This guy's all over the ice. He's involved in the forecheck. He's playing responsible two-way game, even though he looked like a little bit of shit in 3-on-3 yesterday. But that's neither here nor there. But
I got thoughts on the 3-on-3 too. Whenever you're done,
he's just been such a bright spot. You know how Tom, like everybody talked about, like, oh, this team needs to get Connor Bedard help. This team needs to get Connor Bedard help. This team needs to get Connor Bedard help. Guess what? Anton Frondell's that help, or at least a piece of it, because this guy looks like a true superstar. So, Stoney, while you're on that topic, and let's talk a little bit of the 3-on-3 here. I'll put a bookmark in some of these young players. We'll come back to it and poke holes in certain aspects that we want to highlight. But if you're asking about my vibes right now about this team, I'm a little higher up right now, I think, than I was last year, and I think it's because of what this team has added late in the season now, via other leagues and those seasons ending for players like Anton Frondell.
Fair enough. I'm really enthused about what I've seen from Anton Frondell so much that there was some churning going on in the back of my mind. Like, could that be a jersey that I acquired before, a Connor Bedard jersey?
Well,
maybe. I like the way he's played so far. He plays with a different style, right? He's a big kid. He likes to get into the dirty areas.
Lebowski with a quick, great quote here, Tone. Anton Frondell operates at a different frequency than most other young players other than Bedard. You can tell that is on another level. Agreed. And even a differentiation, just like you said, from Connor.
Hey, let's look at the power play from, what was it, last night? Kids firing shots that you don't see other Blackhawks players in the last 5 years take. Not even Connor Bedard himself. He creates offense, and it's good to see. I like it. I like it a lot. The 3-on-3.
Yeah, let's talk.
Here's the problem that I've seen with the 3-on-3 all year. If you don't win the faceoff, the Hawks are probably gonna lose, because I've seen it, and this isn't just a Hawks thing. And I wish the Hawks would sort of employ this. I think it's cheap. I think it's dirty. I don't like it. It leaves me feeling all nasty. But just bring the puck behind your own net, pass it around a little bit, get to that minute mark, and then bring it up the ice and go for the rush. The Hawks have had problems with getting the puck into the offensive zone with whatever they've rolled out there 3-on-3 with line number 1, which 9 times out of 10 incorporates Connor Bedard. There hasn't been a lot of offense on this team outside of Connor Bedard and Tyler Bertuzzi.
Mm-hmm.
We know that.
Yes.
I was a little upset, and might be the first time I'm actually calling Jeff Blashill's decisions into question here. Everybody out there online, Connor Bedard, Anton Frondell out there with Wyatt Kaiser, sounds great. What happens when you get to line 2?
Frank Nazar and insert name here.
Yes, but that's still such a step down. I would have preferred Frank Nazar and Connor Bedard with Frondell coming out second. And that's speaking to the level of, hey, I really put a lot of trust in this kid who's only been here for checks notes 4 games to be that next guy. That's where, I love the attack there. I love that Blashill's like, okay, we're going to go out there and try and end this right away.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. And that's where I'm like, hey, could we have maybe done something a little bit different here? Teams seem to be able to control the game when it goes to 3-on-3 against the Blackhawks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it somewhat could relate to the fact that, Connor Bedard does take some chances. He does turn the puck over. That's part of his game. He's not perfect. He's human. He's going to turn the puck over sometimes. He's going to not win faceoffs.
Right.
So is anybody else on the roster. But if you give up that puck in the NHL and let someone else's, top 2 offensive players or, 2 out of their top 4 offensive players control it against the young Chicago Blackhawks team,
it's probably game over.
And Spencer Knight can only do so much.
100%.
Arvid Soderblom can only do so much. So, I just hate these quick OT losses, and they've stacked up a lot, and they sting. They sting. That's something that this team's going to have to figure out how to do.
Yeah, and I think an important piece, Tone, to that, what you said in that improvement that needs to occur is that it's identified. Like Jeff Blashill had said it. He addressed it. He's like, we're not very good at 3-on-3 right now. We need to fix that. If we're going to win games in this league, you got to be able to play at 3-on-3. And, Tone, I think too, kind of.
I know we're going to get a shorter training camp next year round, but 3-on-3, 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 3-on-3 at the end of every practice.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah, just figure it out. I agree. But I will say, Tone, to kind of pivot the conversation toward maybe diving in a little deeper on Anton Frondell. Because obviously, since our last show, he's signed. Djurgården season has ended. He has debuted, and he has 5 points in 5 games as an NHL player. He's also changed his number already. There's a lot that's happened with Anton Frondell in a very short window of time. But I think with
Rod, he creates news. He's the type of type of hockey player that we like covering a hockey team.
100%. And I think too, to your point, Tone, with the 3-on-3, I think it's a fascinating topic in the sense of splitting up Bedard and Frondell potentially, right? Because we've seen what happens when you put Nazar and Bedard together. A lot of good shit happens when those two play together. Right now, Anton Frondell and Ilya Mikheyev is a rock star duo that I don't think anybody expected. And I'll return to that point a little bit later in the show because we'll actively talk about that. But focusing on Anton Frondell, he really is just, I think it's so impressive. Again, Lebowski asked the question, are you okay that he's played wing and center? I am, and I'm so impressed by how well he handled playing center in the NHL. That is not an easy thing to do as an 18-year-old who's stepping in from the end of an SHL season to be able to do that at a fairly high level. I mean, let's be honest, probably in the last 2 games when Frondell's been playing center, his line has arguably been the best line on the team. And that says so much about what he can become. And Tony, I'll tell you what, he got 15 on the road, and it was confirmed actually by, I believe, somebody that covers Djurgården. I have a name. I need to be better about giving people credit where it's due, Tone. So we're going to do that right here. Where is the note? Found. Nope. Now I found it. His name is Christian Wetterling. But he pretty much covers Djurgården, I believe, over in Sweden. And they said, yeah, he got 15 because they were on the road. He really couldn't control what number he got. Like, he just got thrown a jersey, and that was the end of it. And he wanted to wear 16, and he wants to pay homage to Marcus Kruger, who he sees as a mentor and played with him in Djurgården, and obviously a former Blackhawk who wore 16. And you see all these different things. He scores his first goal wearing number 16 after 4 assists in number 15. But Tony, I'll tell you right now, when I look at Anton Frondell, in my opinion, because agreed here, 5 points in 5 games is impressive. There's another player that wears 16. He happens to play down in South Florida. If Anton Frondell sticks at center and has even anything close to an Alexander Barkov-like career, because Tone, and I think this would be a great thing, and we'll even throw it back to a little draft history for everybody. Let's jog it back to the draft year when Alexander Barkov goes number 2, and everybody goes, "What the hell is Florida doing?" Seth Jones, ironic that name comes up. Seth Jones is available. Why are they passing on this guy? That was former Blackhawks GM Dale Talon making that pick as well at that time. He said, I see a guy that could become the next Jonathan Toews. And Barkov has done that. Maybe even better than Johnny. And I hate to say that as a Blackhawks fan, but he is so good.
That's a little piping hot, but okay. Yeah.
But then you fast forward to the Blackhawks picking again high up in the draft, taking a kid is technically a natural center, but can play wing, who wears number 16 for Team Sweden, now wearing 16 for the Blackhawks. And he's Scandinavian. Be very happy if he looked anything like, granted, the Finnish center down in Florida. But if the Blackhawks have their own elite Swedish weapon, it's going to be electric for the next 10 plus years in Blackhawks hockey. I love this kid. I think by the game, Tone, I become more and more obsessed with Anton Frondell as a hockey player.
Yeah, I would just caution that, and this is, again, I hate to pour cold water all over this.
Are you baseball season's here?
Baseball season's here, so it's already. Yeah, you know
where I'm coming.
You know where I'm going.
I know what's coming.
Small sample size. Let's not count the chickens before they hatch.
Let's not assume he's like a great as Eloy Jimenez or Luis Robert Jr., right? Is that what we're getting at here?
Sure. But let's also remember that Sam Renzel came out, and last year we were on this show talking about, some guys on other teams saying like, wow, this guy's hockey IQ is through the roof. He's got a great shot. And then, he needed a little bit of seasoning.
Sure.
A little bit of seasoning. If that happens to Anton Frondell, I don't expect it to, but I also said the same thing about Sam Renzel last year, right? So if there is a little bit of fall off, if there is some growing pains, I just want to be aware of the fact that, he's coming off of this. There's got to be a huge adrenaline rush. Teams don't have tape prepared on this kid as much as they will come October.
Sure.
And the league adjustments to things. But for all intents and purposes here right now, he looks like the real deal. And I think Barkov is a good comp, and I'll go back to the question. Are we worried?
Might even be a better comp that you like here, Tom.
Oof. That this is, I love the comp here, Lebowski 55. It says in Frondell, I see more similarity in a young Hossa than Barkov in play style. I got to evaluate this with a little bit closer of an eye as a Marian Hossa is my favorite player. I don't think that's a secret if you've listened to this show for a long time. But I like that I like that if that's what it turns out to be. But going back to the question of like, are you, concerned about him playing both wing and center? I think Jeff Blashill's answer here to that question is enough for me to give a little leeway to it. You'd rather try it out now than, in training camp and preseason. And I'm sure they're still going to mix and match a little bit, but see what you have right now. If Oliver Moore has to be your fourth line center and move to wing because Anton Frondell is the guy that can, Ron likes when I get into lineup construction. If Oliver Moore has to be your fourth line center,
what a hilarious thought.
I don't think you're complaining because as a Hawks fan, rewind 10 years, right? Like rewind 10 years and remember when they had to sit there and be like, who's our second line center? If you've got an embarrassment of riches up and down the lineup and they're all, prospects that came up through the draft, I think you've drafted incredibly well. Thinking that everybody's going to stick there is kind of, like a little bit foolish to think that that's going to happen.
Sure.
But at least try it out and see what you have. Because if you do have that, I think it's a lot easier to go out and acquire someone to play on the wing than it is to find a guy at the trade deadline and be like, we're looking for somebody to step in at 2 or 3C and figure it out from there. Now, face-off percentages and all of those other good things are going to play into what this actually looks like.
For sure.
But from the ebbs and flows of the lines and, how you want to mix and match all of this, I don't think you can go wrong whether or not Anton Frondell or Connor Bedard are your first line center and one of them's playing wing, or they're split up and one's 1C and one's 2C. Or hell, that means that Frank Nazar is your 2C and Oliver Moore is your 3C and you'd only need a 4C. So like there's options. I don't think there's a wrong path there, Ron. Yeah. I don't. So I like the fact that they're trying it out. At first I was concerned. I will admit. Mm-hmm. At first I was concerned. I was like, he just got here. And the number one complaint that we've had as Hawks fans, right? And you brought this up, get some help for Connor Bedard. Mm-hmm. Anton Frondell can be that help, but he can also be that help from the fact that just the mere fact that you have another offensive weapon that takes pressure off of Connor Bedard to need to do everything. It doesn't necessarily mean he has to play on the same line. And now some people will probably say, well, what about Frank Nazar? I don't know. I just look at these two games or the two of their games. Mm-hmm. And I think that like from what we've seen so far, I think the ceiling on Frondell is probably a little bit higher than it is on Frank Nazar. And that's not to say that Frank Nazar's isn't pretty high itself.
And I think too, though, Tony, like I don't want to call it PTSD, but I have not so fond memories of every single season during those cup runs being concerned that the Blackhawks didn't have a second line center. That was the most glaring need for this team.
That and a fourth defenseman.
For 10 years.
Yeah.
And, you can make the argument that they figured out fourth defenseman at different times. You Brian Campbell, which
they brought in
Johnny Aduya.
Yeah. They brought in names to fill the gaps.
Yeah. They brought in the names to fill the gaps. And of course we saw the plethora of guys that played 2C, Michael Hanzus, the promotion, Brad Richards, Antoine
Blackhawks legend central.
Yeah. It's hell, even Patrick Sharp and Patrick Kane played center at times because they were just trying to figure it out.
They had to.
If this Chicago Blackhawks team, let's just play the if game here for a hot second. If this Chicago Blackhawks team rolls into the next 10 years with your 1, 2, and 3 C's being Bedard, Frondell, and Nazar, I think to your point, Tony, the trade deadline looks a lot simpler when all you need is a winger versus a center. I'll take depth. Just like in every sport, Tone. Every sport, the better you are up the middle, the better you're going to be. Baseball, It's up the middle. Center, short, second, pitchers, catchers. In basketball, your point guard and your center. In football, your offensive line and your quarterback, right? Like the list goes on and on. But if the Hawks have 3 legit centers, And it could be, right? Like that's what the fun thing about this experiment is you're getting to see what Anton Frondell can do. And Tony, I'll give the shout out while it's here. Again, in the two games that he's been at center, he and Ilya Mikheyev and Tyler Bertuzzi look unbelievable. They look like one of the best lines in hockey right now because they're playing so well. Hell, against the Winnipeg Jets, they tallied all 3 goals for the team. To your point, I think these are all great problems to have. And understanding there's probably going to be growing pains. He's an 18-year-old kid. That's fine. But to your point and to Lebowski's point, you also, though, see that ceiling of just like, holy shit, this kid's good. Like he's at a different level than most other guys.
I like the way he looks on the power play. If I'm gonna like that's where it looks like a weapon. Like look at the power play unit right now. Power play 1. Bedard, Nazar, Frondell. They're all young. They're all gonna get better. Hopefully.
Yeah, ideally.
Ideally, they all get better. And, I know Levshunov is out for the remainder of the year. I would assume he probably gets looks there, maybe Rinzel as well. And then you had Tyler Bertuzzi, who's just the guy in his office. And I think he's a piece. In his office. I love when Tyler Bertuzzi's in his office because there's normally a good chance that he's going to put one home. But I like the way that looks. That's, to me, the way that power play. I know they didn't get that on the 5-on-3, but they moved the puck around incredibly well, and you didn't have to scream shoot at your television.
Yeah, they were letting it rip.
Yeah.
Speaking of Tyler Bertuzzi being in his office, Tony, that sounds like something we need to get on an Obvious shirt with our good friends over at Obvious Shirts. For Blackhawks fans out there, maybe you don't find what you're looking for in the Blackhawks world, but maybe you're a Cubs fan, maybe you're a Bears fan, maybe you're even a Bulls or even a White Sox fan. Obvious Shirts has you covered. ObviousShirts.com. Use OnTap Sports promo code. You'll get 10% off your purchase, and it'll be a way that you can support all of our great shows here on the network. So shout out to our friends over at Obvious Shirts. Tony, my last thought here quickly on Frondell before we continue to push down our rundown for this evening. I think it's really funny that he gets all of his assists, his number 15, and then goal number 1 comes when he switches his number. I think that's just a fun, that's a fun random statistic in Blackhawks lore that you're going to remember for years. Any other thoughts? Any final thoughts from you on Anton Frondell before we talk about another young player that's made their at least their presence known?
Last thoughts on Frondell here, Ron. Finish healthy, finish strong. That's it right here. Put a couple more goals up, continue on this pace. I think it's gonna instill a lot of faith in Blackhawks fans of what they can do next year. And for where we are right now, and I know we went through all the platitudes of, they're better than they were last year and everything.
Sure.
He is the one name that's going to inject the most excitement heading into next season.
Definitely.
Finish healthy. Number 1, finish healthy. Number 2, finish strong. And I think that that'll be a good end to the Blackhawks season, at least in the Frondell camp. Ron, let's 100%. move on to another name.
Let us do that. Sasha, okay. Most people thought it was Boisvert. He said Beauvoir on his Welcome to Chicago video to the faithful.
Can I go with Boisvert?
Yeah, of course you're going to go with Boisvert.
I'm going to go with Boisvert.
Well, you call him Boisvert. I'll call him Beauvoir. But he debuted in Philadelphia. Felt appropriate because we've gotten to know that Sasha Beauvoir is a little bit of a tussler. He likes to throw the old knucks, and we got to see that as he got his fight in Madison Square Garden. Probably a pretty cool moment for the kid when it's all said and done. But he has debuted. He's wearing number 12. He was scratched against Winnipeg, which Blashill said, hey, this was kind of already the plan, more or less. He's getting a taste. To me, that screams he's in Rockford next year, and they kind of already know that. They're giving him a cup of coffee, at the end of the year here to reward him. But I think, Tony, he's a very important piece to the future. Obviously not as exciting as a Frondell, right? But as these veterans age, right, your Donatos, your McKaybs, things like that, maybe they become a little less effective. Of course, there's going to be guys that are busts or guys that get traded if they decide to use some of their draft capital, for example, to go get an elite player, maybe a left-handed D, which seems like something that they could potentially need on that top line in the future, depending on how Kevin Korchinski continues to develop. But I think you look at him and you look at players like, AJ Spellacy, and you look at players like Samuel Savoie, and you look at players like
potentially a Mason West.
Yeah, potentially Mason West when it's all said and done, who are like more those energy grind kind of players that have skill and can contribute. Yes. I think these guys are going to be incredibly important as well. Because, right, I think the one thing that we kind of bitch and moan about with this Blackhawks team is the amount of physicality. Like, there's guys that are physical. We know Connor Bedard isn't afraid to be physical. Tyler Bertuzzi has his moments, but largely this isn't a super physical team right now. I think those guys are coming. And I think Beauvoir is that first chapter of those type guys who they're skillful players. Like, these guys are first-round picks for a reason, but they're going to play a very specific role when this team starts to truly compete. And it's to bring that physical edge and play a heavy style of play while still being able to contribute as depth scoring when your players like Connor Bedard and Anton Frondell and even maybe a Frank Nazar kind of need that little bit of a lift and support going into the future. To me, I think Beauvoir is your prototypical shutdown bottom six center if things pan out well. And even if they don't, I think he's still an important energy player, that you can absolutely inject into the lineup to give you a little something when you need to change up the vibes in the locker room.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with your assessment that he's probably headed to Rockford. He looks a little bit in over his skis, at least just from what I've seen, just a bit. And that's not to say he's not going to stick in the NHL by any stretch of the imagination. I think that in a perfect world, you give him this little bit, and I know that the visa issues sort of held up his start. And the number one thing that I saw online was people saying, well, he got to sit around the team and learn all this stuff. Why are we not playing him? I think that Sam Lafferty's done a really good job of riding in the press box for most of the year, and I'm of the believer that that type of behavior needs to be rewarded for a veteran. So got to get him some reps here down the stretch, and at least let him show what he's got in case he winds up somewhere else. He's they're all playing for their jobs essentially. I don't think that. And, for that aspect too, like Sam Lafferty's a guy that's going to be physical and probably provide the same amount, but just with a little bit of veteran presence in there too. Yeah. But Boisvert, and the only reason I said Boisvert, Ron, is because I feel like this is like the first year. It might be. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've done really goddamn well on this show at learning how to pronounce names.
You have
in the 7-8 years that we've done this.
Yeah.
I've finally figured out, and worked on this pronunciation thing. So I'm allowed one guy, and it might just be Mr. Boisvert for me. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I love the physicality that he brings. This team's going to need someone, and I love that we always go back to the Cup era guys, right? Like we're drawing comps to hosts already, so let's draw another one. Andrew Shaw. Here's a guy that came in, had some scoring ability, wasn't afraid to run his mouth, get into physical battles, fights. They're going to need some sandpaper and some grit, right? That could be any one of the names that we listed. It could be a couple of the names that we listed. The truth of the matter is not all of these pieces are going to fit at the end of the day. But developing these guys, getting them to a point where either they're tradable assets or you figure out that they're not going to stick is one thing. I think the development plan for Boisvert is going to be to go to Rockford, probably spend, a couple of months down there. And then he's probably on the short list for a call up at some point next season. There's going to be a couple of names out there that are also going to be, floating around for these forward positions. But I could see him settling into a bottom six role at some point next season and at least getting some runway. Now, a lot of that's going to have to depend on how he fares in Rockford. Is Sam Savoie ahead of him on that list? I don't know. I don't know where the Blackhawks have him in the grand scheme of things on their depth chart. But there are names that have been doing this in Rockford for a little bit that are probably also going to get a cup of coffee or at least a little bit of a run at some point next year. So I think this final stretch for him isn't really about what he displays on the ice. They're going to evaluate his characteristics off the ice as well. How quick of a learner is he? Adaptable or not? There was all of this stuff towards the end of the college season. Some of it was probably unwarranted. Some of it could have been. We weren't in the locker rooms. We don't know exactly what took place or what happened there. So, I'm sure the Hawks have a better understanding of that than we do. I'm not really worried about him getting scratched for a game. We'll see what the rest of the lineups look down the stretch here. But, if he gets another 3 games out of the 7 and, Lafferty plays the other 4, I'm not losing really much sleep over it. I don't know about you. I think some people may, just because, here's another name that joined us from the college ranks, first round pick, all that good stuff. I just don't think his game profiles right now well for, an everyday NHL player. And that's fine. He's not there yet in his development. And the Hawks kind of have identified that. And I'm pretty sure that you were spot on when you said he's destined for Rockford next season. Barring injuries and a really good training camp, that's probably where they have him slotted. And contracts and how this stuff works better than I do. You can't send him to Rockford right now, is my understanding. So he's here for better or for worse. I don't think it's, a bad thing for him to learn the ways of the NHL, whether or not he's on the ice, just get in the routine of things, practice with the team, get his exposure to the rest of the guys that are up there on the roster, and then head on off into summer and do your off-season prep. So I'm totally fine with everything that they're doing with Sasha Boisvert.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. I don't think I would lose sleep either if he only played 3 or 4 of the next 7. There definitely will be people that do. He's at a different point in his tenure too. Yes, he's a former first-round pick, but he's really only got a college season and a little over a half under his belt because of some injury. I think because of that injury this year, just some of the stuff that happened with BU's weird season, I think they're okay kind of just easing him into it, but they want him to be around the team and see like, hey, you want to be a pro? This is what you got to do. Okay?
The learning aspects.
The learning aspect. And it's, hey, you're not at the same level as Anton Frondell.
Don't show up to practice late like Artem Levchinov. Like those are the things.
Like you're not the number 3 overall pick, right? You're not coming in like Anton Frondell, and that's okay. That's completely okay. I think again to not beat a dead horse, but I think we're on the same page in terms of what comes down to Sasha Beauvoir and how they're treating him down the stretch. Speaking of contracts, Tony, and you said Beauvoir can't go to Rockford. Well, yeah, because he's not on an amateur tryout. He's on his deal. Can't send him down because he wasn't with the team as of the deadline when they do the eligibility for playoff rosters and all that fun stuff. But I'll tell you what, the Blackhawks signed a player today that is going to take an ATO with the Rockford Ice Dogs, and that is goaltender Adam Guyon. Instead of going back for a 3rd season at the University of Minnesota Duluth, he opts to sign with the Blackhawks. He signed a 2-year entry-level contract that will kick into effect next season. So in the fall is when you will see him as a true full-time regular, again, most likely in Rockford, and hopefully playing a lot of minutes. But he will get some action with them on an amateur tryout contract here down the stretch, which I think will be critically important for him. Tony, this one seemed to be a bit of a surprise for a lot of people. I think a lot of people just truly expected Guyon to completely be going back to college for at least one more season and then joining the team next year. I beg the question to you, my friend. Do you think the Blackhawks are fully ready to just prep him in their own backyard because he's going to have the full reign of Rockford's net with Drew Commesso as the backup next season?
That's what my tinfoil hat theory is as well, Ronald. I think that this sort of signals the end of Arvid Soderblom in a Blackhawks sweater. And the reason I say that is Drew Commesso has had his opportunities to come up in the NHL, very small sample size, but has had his opportunities and has done quite well when you think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you really work this. There's a lot of names now once you add guy onto that Rockford roster in the Blackhawks goalie pipeline here, right? You've got Drew Commesso, who's probably nearing ready to at least take on backup duties, at least get a shot at them at the NHL level. You still have, I believe, Arvid Soderblom's under contract for one more year after this season.
That is correct. One more year at 275.
Stanislav Brezhnoy, and I know that there was a little PED action going on there for a little bit there, and it's not what you want to hear. But in the game of baseball, I don't know about you, Ron. I'm a big Jose Canseco guy. I'm a supporter. But that was a name that sort of surprised some people this year. There's a lot floating around. The fact that he's going to go to Rockford and get some work in now signals to me that he's probably going to be with Rockford next season. And I would put him in that pipeline like right beneath Commesso right now. And he might be the more talented of the two of them as well when you really start to go back and dig into some stuff too. So how many years away is Guyon? I would probably venture to say after only 2 years of college, you're probably looking at 3 years, maybe 3 years. Maybe see him in the NHL in a year and a half if you have injury issues.
Maybe he gets the Corey Crawford treatment where he plays like 3 games a year for like 3 years, and then you see him a little bit more full time.
Right, and look what Drew Comesso's done.
Yeah.
What did you get this year? 3-4 games,
and he's been great.
Yeah, so that's moving now, and this one did catch me by surprise as well. In fact, this was a name that I was really high on when we drafted him, and then sort of just floated into the background a little bit. And as a goalie guy here, I think I have to attribute that to the fact that we have Spencer Knight, and it was a lot better than watching Peter Mrazek and Arvid Soderblom 10 goal to watch an actual good goaltender that could be with this team for the future play at the NHL level. So you start not worrying as much about what's not signed to your current roster yet, but I'm happy he's here now. And yeah, I think your tinfoil hat and my tinfoil hat's probably what's going to happen. Now, has Arvid Soderblom, this is the real question, has Arvid Soderblom played well enough this season for somebody to want him on their NHL roster next year? And that's something that the Blackhawks are going to need to figure out. And if not, what are you going to need to package with an Arvid Soderblom to get a return? Or are you just flat out cutting Arvid Soderblom? So there's a lot of things that can happen here. I will have to wait till the offseason to see what happens. And I think we could probably do a whole show on that. So I don't want to go too deep into the weeds, but it's an interesting development for sure.
It is. And just a quick thought, I think that with that to partially answer your question, I think this is a good back burner segment for sometime during the playoffs when we need to get some Hawks content out. I think there is a market for Arvid Soderblom. I really do. I think because goaltending is so volatile in the NHL, there's going to be a team that'll happily give him a chance because he's a 1-year contract for less than $3 million and has proven at times he's capable of being like a 1A goalie. I think there's going to be plenty of teams lining up. I wonder if the Blackhawks use him in something else to get somebody better for another part of the team, and he becomes a part of that type of package. It'll be interesting to see how they approach it. And again, we'll have to get, give it some time, but I think that'll be certainly something interesting to see. And Lebowski says here, and I agree with this as well. No reason to rush Guyon. Let him play in Rockford as much as humanly possible. He says, no reason to rush Guyon. Commesso should get the real extended look. I agree. And I think, again, Tony, you put it perfectly, right? We saw him for like a game or two over the last couple of seasons, but mostly he's just dominated Rockford, and he's setting records for games played as a goalie in Rockford. And Like he's getting as much run as humanly possible. And then this year he came up and really outside of the freak call up against Washington, where he didn't even think he was going to be playing, he's been spectacular in every other bit of action in the Indian head sweater so far this year. So will be something fascinating to keep an eye on and follow along. Tony, before we get to two last pieces of news and then we get to our habitual segments here, I do want to at least kick the tires on this idea really quick. And again, this probably a deeper conversation as well for once the season concludes. But 4 points in his last 5 games. Looks invigorated playing with Anton Frondell. Perhaps that running mate with Anton Frondell in a 3-on-3 overtime because of his speed, defensive prowess. He's got 20-goal potential. You kept him through the trade deadline, Tony. After the recent play of Ilya Mikheyev, it feels like they have to sign him, right? At this point. Otherwise, why would you keep him?
Your guess is as good as mine. It takes 2 to tango, right? Takes 2 to tango. But at a certain point on the day of the trade deadline, if the offers are there and they're not, what you want, and you're just trying to move the asset for the reason of moving the asset, you're probably going to take a deal, right? I think in a similar fashion to the whole Ryan Donato thing last year.
Yeah.
I think it's a good chance that he stays.
Okay.
I think it's a good chance he stays. Now, when free agency opens up, somebody could throw him a dollar amount that the Hawks, don't want to go to. That's true. That's fair. But I just look at his, like, the free agent market right now, and this is what kind of scares me a little bit. There's not a lot of Ilya Mikheyevs out there on the free agent market.
Nope.
Would be very advantageous for Ilya Mikheyev to get to free agency and see what those offers come in at. Now, that's not in the Hawks' best interest either. So, again, just like it takes 2 to tango to make a trade, it's going to take 2 to tango to get the deal done. Hawks haven't really shown in recent history that they've missed out on letting a guy walk, right? In the NHL, it just doesn't seem to happen too much.
Depends.
If you really want the guy, you'll pay to keep him.
Yeah.
So it's in the Hawks camp, really. Make an offer that he can't refuse.
Tony, I have a little bit of a hot take for you here really quick. I think
Sure.
you'll appreciate this tinfoil hat take. I think the Blackhawks are fully prepared to go to what would be probably an uncomfortable number for most other teams with Ilya Mikheyev on, we'll call it a 3-year deal, just for shits and giggles, because they fully intend on moving on from Teuvo Teravainen in this offseason.
I can see that.
He's been relegated to the 4th line. That's almost $5 million a year that he's being paid right now. And you say, hey, look, we just need to move on from you because we got young kids that we want to give time to, or, we're not going to be able to play you a ton, or we'll go give you a chance to go compete for a cup, and knowing that
I don't like it, but
I don't like it either. But look at what Ilya Mikheyev's done playing next to Anton Frondell and Tyler Bertuzzi. Bertuzzi's going to be here. He's coming off a 30-goal season. There's 2 more years at an incredible cap number for what he does.
And depending on where he's at the end of that contract, I'm giving him a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal and just stringing that out. He looks fucking awesome in Blashill's system.
He does.
He's in his office all the time, and I love that.
He is in his office. And so that's why I think Ilya Mikheyev, I think there's a world where the Blackhawks could go to like $6.5-7 million a year with Ilya Mikheyev. Maybe even more.
That's a surprising number. But when you look at the full body of work,
and they need to get to the floor if they move on from Teravainen,
which is true, I think Ilya Mikheyev would be a big miss if they do not re-sign him. I think he would be a big miss. And hey, I remember sitting here at one point in time before the trade deadline, we were talking about, how this PK unit will look.
Yeah.
After the trade deadline and, losing Murphy. Hey, Grizzlick's done for the season. There's a real scenario where they do move on from Ilya Mikheyev, and this PK unit might not be a top PK unit anymore. He's really the holdover from some of that in terms of the vets that have been moved. I just think you got to get pen to paper somehow there, and if it takes 7, it's a little uncomfortable for me, Ron. But if it takes that,
and again, I'm not.
You might have to do it.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily guaranteeing. And Lebowski says there ain't no way he's getting 7, but think about it this way: it is a weak free agency class, incredibly weak. And
my number is probably closer to 5 than it is 7. I'll put it that way.
And I think that's what the Blackhawks ultimately probably do want to give him, is somewhere around $5 million a year for 3 years, right? I'm sure he's going to want term. They probably won't want to give him term because he is a little bit older than like Ryan Donato, for example, when they gave him a 4-year contract. Maybe you say, hey, we'll give you a little bit extra because we can. Like, we have that flexibility right now, because I think he walks onto the market and gets 5 from somebody, maybe for 4 years. So it might take 6,
5.5, 6
for 3 years to get it done.
Are you going to drop a 6, 7, Ron? You going to drop a 6, 7 for the kids?
No, not tonight, Tony. I'll save it for later. There's only so many of those in my daily motions that I can humanly handle. But again, I will say, I just think, again, I think this is a great episode right now, Tony, because we're talking about this team not becoming April Fools down the stretch, which is the title of our episode tonight, is hoping the Blackhawks avoid being April Fools. And happy April Fool's Day to everybody out there. But I think this is a great show to start teeing up some of these ideas, because I think these are conversations for late April, early May, before the offseason really gets kind of going, to discuss. Kyle Davidson's got some interesting business when it's all said and done here coming this summer. And I think this is one of those questions that needed to be addressed as well. Any final thoughts, Tom, before we set up some of these news items and get into our last 2 segments?
Nothing from me here.
Okay, and one quick thought from Lebowski. If you give Mikheyev $7 million, that skews the numbers of every other young player on the team when they come up for a contract. Great point. I also think it's also worth noting the impending cap growth. I think $7 million in 3 years looks like what 5.5, even 5 does right now, because it's growing faster than we've ever seen before. So again, but I think that's an incredible point to bring up, and a very valid point as well, especially as a lot of these young kids are coming up to get paid. So will be interesting to see when it's all said and done. Tony, just as we wrap things up here, you mentioned some of these injuries for this Blackhawks team down the stretch. There's been a few. Obviously, this team has been without Oliver Moore for a long time. Jeff Blashill making comments on the young winger on Wednesday. He said, there's an outside chance he might play the last couple games of the season, which would be electric because those are going to be at the United Center. Where does he fit in this lineup? Where do you plug him in if he does potentially come back? But at the same time, Blashill also pumped the brakes and said, but there's a really good chance the season's over too. So I don't think they really know where he's at right now. They're hoping he progresses better than for worse and he can get some more action. But Tony, 2 names we do know that are done for the season. You mentioned one of them a little bit earlier, and Artem Levshinov ended up messing up his hand or his wrist, and tried to play through it for 2 games, and it just wasn't working. And I think that's the smart move to do. I thought he improved, though, after the Olympic break. And Matt Grzelcyk. So what seems like his Blackhawks tenure likely done due to injury, which is unfortunate. Had a really nice season, though, for the Blackhawks when you think about it, and came in on a PTO before the season and ultimately signed for 1 year. But that does give way as a result. Just something to keep in mind. Kevin Korchinski now getting a full-time look here for these last couple games. I think it's critically important for him. And speaking of things that are critically important, we discussed a few episodes back about the passing of Troy Murray this season, and how that's a real just downer on the Blackhawks organization and fan base. Well, appropriately, this week we learned he will be a Blackhawks Hall of Famer. This team has mentioned already the expansion of a Blackhawks Hall of Fame for guys that aren't quite retired jersey level, but ensuring that they honor properly those players that were phenomenal in the red, black, and white. Troy Murray's name absolutely deserving of being there. So some cool and uplifting news on that front as well. As always, Tony, the standings update, Blackhawks still 9 points out of a playoff spot. So you're telling me there's a chance. And they're now 18 points clear of the basement as Vancouver just completely sputters as they look to have the best odds at the number 1 overall pick. And then, as we mentioned, though, they're second to last in the league standings, so that still positions them for a really good draft pick. Tony, what say you? Shall we get into our final segments?
Yeah, we can get into the final segments here, Ronald.
It's time to ruffle some feathers.
Tony, I ask you first. Do you have any feathers to ruffle this evening?
You know what, Ronald? I'm not really in a ruffling feathers kind of mood. I think you may have some ruffling of feathers to do. You've normally brought a lot of feathers to ruffle this season, and
I think it's just because I'm a sicko and I enjoy ruffling some feathers.
You do enjoy ruffling.
I don't get to be the bad guy very often, so I relish in the opportunity.
I feel like I do. I feel like I do it enough throughout the normal show sometimes that like it's hard for me to pick one.
You've already exhausted your 3 or 4 throughout the course of the show.
Ronald, ruffle some feathers. One might come to me after you read out this one.
Yeah, you got it. So I'll tell you what. I will preface this. It is April Fool's Day, and I thought about it. It's like, do I try to like just really screw with people and like prepare this whole speech of like, I have bad news, I'm retiring from On Tap or something of that nature for a good April Fool's joke, but I decided against it. I don't have the energy for it today. Been up since 4:30 this morning. Wasn't feeling it, but I will actually ruffle some feathers, Tony, because this ruffled my feathers the other day, and I wrote about it over at ontapsportsnet.com. Florida is in an absolute free fall. They are now sitting 7 important players down the stretch, including names like Brad Marchand, Sam Reinhart, obviously Alexander Barkov, who dealt with the ACL and MCL injury back in training camp, and a couple of notable defensemen as well, and some other depth forwards. They are a shell of themselves. Their top 6 is still high quality. Matthew Tkachuk, Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Bennett, etc. But being out without all those other names, being without Anton Lundell, not to be confused with Anton Frondell, they're missing a lot. They're free falling in the standings. Right now, they're sitting about, I'll give it to you now, Tony, that 6-7 spot in the standings for number 1 overall draft odds. They're going to keep their pick. The Hawks aren't getting 2 first-round picks in 2026, folks. I'm just going to remind you of that really quick. And it sucks. Sucks that we had to learn this year about that fucking clause in the trade for the top 10 protection. It kind of sucks, man. But it's the perfect storm because they're in a position to still have a top 5 pick. That's what saves them in this year's draft because it is such a good draft class. But I'm a little salty. Now, keeping that in mind, 27 expected to be a solid draft. I don't think it's better per se maybe than this 26 class. They have 3 potentially first-round picks, and they're probably going to get the condition on Edmonton's. Let's be real. Stan Bowman's going to trade that pick as soon as he humanly can, and that's going to lock in the Hawks pick in 27 with their number 1. That's 3 firsts in 27. That allows you, if you're the Chicago Blackhawks this summer, especially like right after or even at the draft, to pull some really fun triggers. And if you're going to upgrade this team, do it via a trade, because I don't think they have the ability right now to do it via free agency. But it still sucks that you're not getting a second first this year instead and taking 2 cracks at this really good draft class, especially if this Florida pick ends up in the top 10, which it looks like it will. So Florida's free fall, ladies and gentlemen, will be the reason the Blackhawks only pick once in the early picks. I'm going to put that little asterisk there. In the early picks of this draft, they do have 3 seconds, though, and I would not be shocked if Kyle Davidson traded back into the late part of the first round to take a swing on some talent. We've seen him do that with guys like Sam Renzel, Mason West, etc. over the last few seasons. Even Vaclav Nestrasil, another great name that's in the Blackhawks prospect pool, Tone. So I'm in GM Ron mode on that one. But I'm just reminding everybody, because it kind of sucks. And I want everybody to relish in kind of my pile of mud as well with me. I don't want to be alone here, just kicking my feet around and flicking the mud to watch it create little ripple effects.
Ron, you in GM mode is electric. We'll just put it that way. Now, I have a question for you. Follow up on this little scenario that you've created here. 3 first-round draft picks next season, right? And talking about trade possibilities. Give me a name. Give me a name that you're targeting if you're Kyle Davidson. And maybe it's not just, one of these draft picks straight up or whatever, but like,
no, absolutely.
Give me a trade that improves this team.
There is a team that, without a single doubt in my mind, is going to just completely overhaul everything in the organization this summer. They've already done their GM. Their coach is 100% next, and I think star players on their roster are right behind them. We've heard this name circle long before this season, but it kind of resurrected again. Kyle Davidson's got a bit of a man crush on Matthew Nyes up in Toronto. He tried to acquire him once before, which was ultimately the trade that brought, if I remember correctly, it would have brought him to Chicago for Marc-Andre Fleury, if you recall, but that trade got nixed. It never happened. I think they take a swing at him again. He's on I think it's $7.79 or $7.5 million a year contract. He's locked in for a long time. He has no trade protection. So he's one of the few players on Toronto that's completely easy to move. And if you're the Blackhawks, Toronto's going to be really, really bad in 2026, 27. You could offer them some 27 first-round picks now because your pick gets deferred thanks to Florida. You've got 3 2s this year. You've got some of these prospects, Tone, that are hanging around that you got to find a place for soon. Kevin Korchinski. They need a goalie. Arvid Soderblom. Now, all of a sudden, a trade could really make a lot of sense here with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Blackhawks. We've seen Kyle Davidson do business with the Leafs as an organization already, right? He sent Jake McCabe there in recent years. Got a first-round pick out of it, too. Don't forget. He's going to be a name that I'm keeping an eye on, Tony, and I think because we already heard there's some smoke. I will give you one more name on my short list of guys that I would like to see them take a swing on, just based on whatever they find. Pavel Dorofeyev.
That's one that I'm not going to be able to pronounce. I don't like
No,
that.
you would not be able to pronounce. But I'll tell you what. He's incredible. 30-plus goal scorer in Vegas. There's not a way in hell they were going to be able to pay him. He's a restricted free agent. So the Hawks could give Vegas something that they desperately need, which is cap space. Even still. And maybe his rights to give him that big contract. And I think the Hawks can help Vegas just acquire assets to keep their train going. I don't think they're going to rebuild by any means, but they don't have a prospect pool. And if the Hawks are like, hey, we'll give you a couple guys, and if you want to turn around and flip them for other assets, you can. But we'll give you trade chips, and we'll take them off your hands before he even has to get to free agency. And somebody might offer sheet you because there's teams with cap space that can afford to do that. I would really like to see Pavel Dorofeyev in a Blackhawks jersey. I think he'd be so much fun. And if you paired him potentially with a Roman Kanserov next season, wouldn't that just be so fun?
And that's an interesting thing that's the first time that Roman Kanserov's name has come up on this show.
Yes, it is.
We're over an hour and 10 minutes in. And
36 goals in the KHL this year, Tom. Don't forget.
That's probably a top 6 forward on this team next year.
Yep.
I don't even know how to pronounce that guy's name, and I'm not going to try right now. But you brought up an interesting thing. Teams with cap space to offer sheet people.
Mm.
Here's my ruffle some feathers, Ron. Does GMKD get very aggressive this offseason with the offer sheet?
Maybe.
It's a question for you, because one of the things that we haven't seen yet is him go out and acquire veteran talent, right? Like stars, Tyler Bertuzzi, Table Terravine, pieces, but not guys that could be stars. Say a trade doesn't come to fruition, or they don't think that they're going to, want to part with some of these assets. Could this be the year of Kyle Davidson's offer sheet? We've had this discussion before, but is that a name that you could see being offer sheeted by the Chicago Blackhawks? And do you see Kyle Davidson getting that aggressive this offseason, or will he stay status quo?
I think Kyle Davidson would be willing to be aggressive with the offer sheet if they truly believe they can get the guy that they want. And it's a good RFA class. There's a lot of really solid names out there. Maybe it's not even a star that he necessarily goes after, but just a guy that seems like a good role player. I think a great example of that is what St. Louis did with the offer sheet a few years ago. They really banged Edmonton by taking Broberg and Holloway, and both of those players have turned into very key pieces for St. Louis. I wouldn't even be mad if he went that way. And I know people are going to want to hear that, oh, yeah, I think it's Dorofeyev, it's Jason Robertson, it's all these big RFA names that are out there that they could go offer sheet. I think there's a world where some of these like more middle of the pack guys are the ones kind of more in his wheelhouse.
And here's my next question for you. Do you think that he would need to venture into the RFA world and do offer sheets?
I think it's certainly possible, especially when you look at the various teams that have players out there that are offer sheetable. I think Zach Benson is another fascinating name. Dylan Holloway is ironically once again an RFA.
I can't wait to get to the offseason with you. It's going to be electric.
It's going to be so fun. It's going to be fun. But there's a lot of fascinating names. Cole Perfetti, just to name a few. Like there's going to be some pretty good names out there that they could go after. So I would never say never, but I really don't know. I really don't know when it's all said and done, Tone. But that's a hell of a ruffle some feathers. The offer sheet getting used here in Chicago.
The offer sheet.
A lot of fun. Tony, what do you say? We keep this train moving?
Yep, let's get some stick taps.
Time to give out some stick taps.
All right, time to give out stick taps here. Tony, I will give you the floor first here. Who are you handing out your stick tap to?
I am handing out my stick tap to a veteran forward on the Chicago Blackhawks roster who's had himself a hell of a season and has become probably one of my favorite players on this roster over the course of 2 years, and that's Mr. Tyler Bertuzzi. We've mentioned him a couple of times on this show, Ron. I love when he's in his office, and he's been in his office, I think, 29 out of 31 times, and that's a new career high for Mr. Tyler Bertuzzi, 31 goals. I was posting to X about this last night. How could anybody have imagined that Tyler Bertuzzi was going to put up and tie career high goals with 7-8 games remaining in the season, and then go and add another multi-goal game to put himself with a new career high this early, really, this early? He's been healthy. He's been a workhorse. He's played up and down the lineup.
Sure.
He's Mr. Consistent on this roster right now. You needed this year from someone. Ryan Donato's goal production kind of fell off from last year. Tyler Bertuzzi's made up for it. Tyler Bertuzzi has been everything and more that you've wanted him to be, And as I said, he fits perfectly into Jeff Blashill's offense. Now, the cool part about this is they didn't go out and acquire the player to fit into the system. They already had the guy. And then the coach came in and put the system in place, and you saw him have a better year.
Yeah.
Tyler Bertuzzi, Jeff Blashill, history back in Detroit. I think there's a reason why he wears an A and has been just everything that he has been this season. And I think Jeff Blashill is one of the reasons behind that, outside of just a tremendous work ethic and an ability to get in front of the net. I don't know how many years, Ron, we sat there and we're like, you got to go to the dirty areas on this show, and you got to get the dirty goals. You got to find a way to, deflect pucks in, just get it to the front of the net, get pucks deep, all the hockey cliches. That's Tyler Bertuzzi. He's a hockey player, just straight up hockey player. Tyler Bertuzzi. I have absolutely enjoyed watching him play. The last few minutes of that game yesterday, when he was on hat trick watch, and you're in the final moments of that game, he was absolutely fucking flying around the ice like a bat out of hell. I didn't know he could skate that fast. I've never seen that before out of him.
He's able to wheel it up when he needs to.
He's able to wheel it up when he needs to, and he plays with a ton of energy. He's on a power play unit that's got a ton of kids. He is the veteran leadership on this team right now, at least for the forward group. Not that there's really any defensive veterans, unless you want to consider an injured Matt Grzelcyk and a fourth-year Alex Vlasic.
Yeah.
Tyler Bertuzzi is it. I think he's done a really good job since the departure of what was the old leadership group on this team of sort of carrying the torch, right? Like,
yeah,
his game hasn't missed a beat. He's had a career year on a team that's sort of in the basement. He has not let up. He has played winning hockey. And on some nights when this team just doesn't seem to show up, Tyler Bertuzzi's still there in his office, at his job, 9 to 5, everything you want in a professional hockey player. So for the full season, Tyler Bertuzzi stick taps. I think that he's going to give off a lot of, veteran leadership, just pointers, tips to some of these guys. But outside of that, he's producing, right? It's not the Nick Foligno, we're towards the end of our career. It's just the veteran leadership aspects of this. No, this guy's producing at the same time. And that's really good to see because this team doesn't have a lot of it. And I don't think you can argue with a 31-goal year. And it might end up closer to 34, 35 by the time we're done in 7 games. He's scored at a high clip. I know the career shooting percentage is a little bit lower than what he's at. I think it's like 20 to 15. But we look where all these goals are coming from. They're right there. They're not, not really lucky goals. You know what I mean? It's you're putting yourself in an opportunity to score, and that's what I like about it. And that's probably the reason why the shooting percentage is up a little bit, Ron. I want to give a secondary stick tap. This one's not on the sheet. That's Nick Lardis. We shit all over Nick Lardis on our last show and talked about how he needed to earn his way up the lineup. And he was given an opportunity, and he's run with it. Nick Lardis has looked night and day different. Got to admit when you're wrong about some things. I was wrong. I think that Nick Lardis, with the opportunity that he was given, took the ball, put it in the back of the net, right? Like that's what you want. So secondary stick taps to Nick Lardis. He's looked phenomenal with a little bit of an adjustment to the lineup. So Tyler Bertuzzi, Nick Lardis, stick taps to both of you. I was wrong. Probably shouldn't have shat on you so much last week or a week and a half ago, but that's why we do this. So, Ron, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I will follow you up in saying that I too said the same thing about Lardis, and I'm glad he's taken the opportunity by the balls and run with it. And yeah, hand up. We were wrong. He's been great. Good for him, man. I hope he continues to do it, especially down the stretch here, and keep that stock up going into next season. I've also got two, Tony. One, just because it's another career milestone, even though I think this player is going to just blow that number out of the water next season. But congratulations, Connor Bedard, for a new career high in points. 68 points through his time so far. Obviously, plenty of time to add to that number. I think he ends up probably finishing somewhere closer to 73 or 74 when it's all said and done here before the season closes. But good stuff from him. I think he blows that number out of the water next year. I think it's a 100-point season. We saw him on that pace early this year before the injury. I think he gets back to that point as well and plays with that confidence again when it's all said and done. And then I'm going to go with another centerman in Frank Nazar. You talked about at the top of the show, Tone, his cold streak and how that could really stop the Hawks for a while. He's turned it back on. He's pretty much been a point-per-game player over his last 15. He's driving play from the third line. He's making, an Andre Burakovsky and Ryan Donato line dangerous. He's really balancing out their lineup. And again, we were talking about the 1-2-3 punch down the middle. You can space these guys out, and we saw Pittsburgh win that way back in the day with three really good centers.
Hey, remember when the Hawks were able to roll four lines?
Sure do. It's nice to have. So I think that's the closest we've seen to this team running four lines. It has been Nazar going down to the third line and really piloting that. So a stick tap to number 91 as well when it's all said and done. Tone, just a quick what's on tap next here. The upcoming slate of games, we will be back most likely following this West Coast trip. Tone, maybe, just maybe, a little sicko Saturday night action after a late game. Who knows? We'll get back to you from the Four Feathers podcast. But we mentioned that West Coast trip. That's where the Hawks start on Thursday, April 2nd. So if you're listening to this on Thursday in your podcast form, first off, we appreciate you. Please give us 5 stars. Secondly, Edmonton at 8 p.m. on CHSN. That is Thursday's game. And then Saturday, they head to Seattle. That's a 9 o'clock start, also on CHSN. In fact, every game the rest of the season is on CHSN. So there's no more ESPN, Hulu. There's no more TNT for the Hawks. Just local broadcasts from here on out. They will follow that up with a 9 o'clock start on Monday against San Jose in San Jose. We all know the Celebrini-Bedard rivalry, quote unquote, that's been created by these two fan bases. We'll get to see that in action on Mondays. They close out that trip. And then to start the 4-game homestand that ends the season, the Blackhawks will welcome the Carolina Hurricanes to town at 7:30 on CHSN. And then it is a week from Thursday. Tone, there's some good games coming up. They play some good teams down the stretch. I'm just looking forward to continued Blackhawks hockey. And hopefully less of these games they'll want back tracker games because, as we noted earlier, 2 more added. And that rounds out our rundown here, Town. But the last 2 games onto the sheet. It sucks. Tony, final thoughts, my friend.
Final thoughts, like I've said a bunch of times, man. Finish strong, finish healthy. I don't want to add any more games to the games I'll want back tracker. That's my number 3. As you just sort of brought up, the last 2 have been in that added to that sheet, and we don't like that. You really look at that, Ron. You take 2 points out of about half of those. What'd you say? We're 9 points out. 15 games. Look at where this team could be. That's the frustrating part. Because you still sit with this, second worst record in hockey right now. You are in a lot of these games. And I know I'm going to think about some of them over summer. Mm-hmm. You damn well know the coaching staff is, and probably the players too.
Yeah.
I know the whole mentality of flush it. Forget about it. As a White Sox manager once said,
Tony is in full baseball mode, ladies and gents.
I'm not flushing those.
Yeah.
I want those to turn into wins. And so winning close games, blowing a team out down the stretch here, Give me something positive to think about, because we probably only have, like you said, what, 1 or 2 more shows before we ride off into the summer. Some playoff hockey. We go our ways on our baseball stuff. Football season will come. Hockey training camp will start, and I'll still be thinking about how this team could have been a playoff team if we didn't have to flush so many times, Ron. So, hey, finish strong, finish healthy, and find ways to string together a couple 2-3 wins, and we'll be all right. Ron, that's all I got.
I hear you there, Tone. I'll say for my final thoughts, I think along the same breath as your final thought, those games will sting, and I think that's a reminder that, like, yeah, this team they were there, they're close, and maybe it is a perfect storm that this team's just bad enough to be hovering at the bottom of a really weird Western Conference right now, where you really are in kind of a perfect spot for this year. You add one more horse to this thing and see what happens. And I think that's the exciting part. But I agree with you, Tone. I think they could have been a year ahead of schedule. Some things went their way. And that's definitely going to eat over the summer. But I think that's going to build that anticipation for next season and what's to come with the Chicago Blackhawks team. And very much looking forward to it. Tone, at 4 Feathers Pod is where everybody can follow along on the socials. Be sure to follow us there. Follow at OnTap Sportsnet as well. Head over to the YouTube, OnTap Sportsnet. Like, subscribe, hit that bell button. You know when all of our shows, including us here at 4 Feathers, go live and are on your screen. Of course, check out all of our writing over at ontapsportsnet.com as well. And you can find out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Tone, felt great being back on the microphone. From Anton Frondell to other youngsters to a lot of off-season what-ifs. This was a loaded show, but can't wait to watch some West Coast late-night hockey over the next 3 games. And then, Tone, we get 2 trips to the UC before this thing's all said and done. So that'll be exciting as well. And we'll be continuing to report back here at the 4 Feathers Podcast. Tone, it is always a pleasure, my friend, to talk Blackhawks hockey with you. Thank you to everybody who joined us. And what do you say, my friend? Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.